Several factors affect electrical wiring costs. Firstly, the size of the building influences the amount of materials and labor required. A larger building necessitates more wiring, conduit, and devices, directly impacting the overall cost. Secondly, the type of wiring materials used significantly affects expenses. For example, using EMT, electrical metallic tubing, is more expensive than using Romex, non-metallic sheet cable, especially for commercial projects. The complexity of the electrical system is another important factor. A complex system with numerous circuits, panels, and specialized equipment will naturally cost more than a simple system. Labor costs also play a crucial role. Electricians' hourly rates and the time required to complete the installation significantly contribute to the overall project cost. The number of outlets, switches, and fixtures directly impacts the amount of materials and labor needed. More devices mean more wiring, boxes, and installation time. Building codes and regulations must be followed. Compliance with these codes can add to the cost of the project, especially if specific requirements necessitate specialized materials or installation methods. In the context of this particular project, a bid of around $5,000 appears to be a reasonable estimate based on the scope of work described. However, competitors' bids around $3,500 seem exceptionally low. It may be difficult for them to make a profit at this price point, especially considering the cost of materials such as EMT pipes, electrical wires, and other necessary components. Electricians typically charge hourly rates, and installing electrical systems require skilled labor. Ensuring compliance with building codes can also add to the cost of the project. A high bid may be due to several reasons. If one primarily does residential work, they may not have the same experience and efficiency in handling commercial projects. Commercial projects often require different techniques, materials, and code compliance measures than residential projects, which can increase the time and cost involved. Material costs can vary depending on the supplier. Sourcing materials from more expensive suppliers or paying higher prices for bulk orders can inflate the overall cost. It is also possible that additional services were included in a bid, such as providing fixtures, which the competitors did not include. Including these extra services will naturally increase the overall cost of the project. To provide more competitive bids in the future, there are several considerations. Firstly, research industry benchmarks and compare prices to other contractors in the area. Understanding the average prices for similar projects can help calibrate the bids to be more competitive. Secondly, break down costs into materials, labor, and overhead to identify areas where one can optimize expenses. A detailed cost analysis can reveal where savings can be achieved. Thirdly, getting quotes from multiple suppliers for materials can help secure the best prices. Shopping around for materials can lead to significant cost savings. Lastly, consider partnering with other contractors or subcontractors to reduce labor costs. Collaboration can help reduce expenses. The initial bid appears to be reasonable, but it is possible to optimize costs and provide a more competitive price in the future. By carefully considering the factors mentioned, such as material costs, labor rates, and code compliance requirements, pricing strategy can be improved, and the chances of winning commercial electrical projects can be increased. Additionally, there are some items that could influence the price, like the distance from the panel to the furthest outlet, the ease of the installation, and how many people are needed to perform the work. Depending on the height of the ceiling, the person may need to rent a lift to make it easier to get the job done. If there is limited room to maneuver, they may need to use smaller sections of EMT conduit, making the job longer. Also, the type of wire being used will determine the size of the conduit. If larger wire is used for voltage drop, then bigger conduit is needed, increasing the price. Another consideration is the type of occupancy. If the customer has a business where they are working with flammable materials, there may be a requirement for explosion-proof boxes and conduit, which significantly increases the price. Voltage drop is an important consideration when running electrical circuits, especially over long distances. Voltage drop occurs when the voltage at the end of a circuit is lower than the voltage at the source due to the impedance of the wires. This can cause lights to dim, motors to run inefficiently, and electronic equipment to malfunction. To minimize voltage drop, it is important to use the correct wire size for the length of the circuit and the amount of current it will carry. The National Electrical Code, or NEC, provides guidelines for determining the appropriate wire size based on these factors. For example, NEC Table 310.15 B16 provides ampacity ratings for different wire sizes and insulation types. These ratings are based on the wire's ability to dissipate heat without exceeding its temperature rating. When calculating voltage drop, it is important to consider the total length of the circuit, including both the outgoing and return conductors. The voltage drop can be calculated using Ohm's law, which states that voltage equals current times resistance, or volts equals amps times ohms. The resistance of the wire can be determined using tables that provide the resistance per foot for different wire sizes and materials. The NEC recommends the voltage drop should not exceed 3% for branch circuits and 5% for feeders. Branch circuits are the circuits that supply power to outlets, lights, and appliances, while feeders are the circuits that supply power to branch circuits. If the calculated voltage drop exceeds these limits, the wire size should be increased to reduce the resistance and minimize voltage drop. In addition to wire size, other factors can also affect voltage drop. For example, using a higher voltage can reduce voltage drop because the current required to deliver the same amount of power is lower. Also, using parallel conductors can reduce voltage drop because it effectively increases the wire size and reduces the resistance. When installing electrical circuits, it is important to properly terminate the wires and make sure that all connections are tight. Loose connections can increase resistance and cause voltage drop, as well as create a fire hazard. It is also important to protect the wires from physical damage and environmental factors that can degrade the insulation and increase resistance. Overall, minimizing voltage drop is essential for ensuring the safe and efficient operation of electrical equipment. By using the correct wire size, minimizing circuit length, and making proper connections, voltage drop can be kept within acceptable limits and the performance of electrical systems can be optimized. The type of electrical panel being installed will also affect the overall cost. A standard panel for residential use will be less expensive than a commercial panel with more features and higher amperage ratings. Additionally, the complexity of the wiring installation will impact the labor costs. If the building has many walls, corners, or other obstructions, it may take longer to run the wiring and install the electrical devices, increasing the labor costs. The location of the building can also affect the overall cost of the electrical work. In areas with higher labor rates or stricter building codes, the cost of the project may be higher than in other areas. It is important to factor in these regional differences when estimating the cost of an electrical project. Furthermore, the type of electrical devices being installed can also impact the overall cost. For example, installing smart switches or dimmers will be more expensive than installing standard switches, and installing LED lighting will be more expensive than installing incandescent lighting. The choice of electrical devices should be based on the customer's needs and budget. When preparing an electrical bid, it is important to be as detailed and accurate as possible. Include a breakdown of the costs for materials, labor, and any other expenses, such as permits or equipment rentals. Also, be sure to clearly define the scope of work and any exclusions, such as providing fixtures or making structural modifications. By providing a clear and comprehensive bid, you can help the customer understand the value of your services and increase your chances of winning the project. Another important consideration is the type of conduit being used. While EMT, or electrical metallic tubing, is a common choice for commercial projects, there are other options available, such as rigid metal conduit, or RMC, and flexible metal conduit, or FMC. RMC is the heaviest and most durable type of conduit, and it is typically used in areas where the wiring is subject to physical damage. FMC is more flexible than EMT or RMC, and it is often used in tight spaces or where the wiring needs to be easily moved. The choice of conduit will depend on the specific requirements of the project and the local building codes. In addition to the type of conduit, the size of the conduit is also important. The conduit must be large enough to accommodate all of the wires that will be run through it, without exceeding the fill capacity specified in the NEC. The fill capacity is the maximum percentage of the conduit's cross-sectional area that can be occupied by wires. Exceeding the fill capacity can make it difficult to pull the wires through the conduit and can also increase the risk of damage to the wires. When planning the layout of the electrical system, it is important to consider the location of the electrical panel, outlets, switches, and fixtures. The panel should be located in a convenient and accessible location, and the outlets and switches should be placed where they will be most useful. The fixtures should be chosen based on the lighting needs of the space and the aesthetic preferences of the customer. It is also important to ensure that all of the electrical devices are properly grounded. Grounding is the process of connecting the metal parts of electrical equipment to the earth, which provides a path for fault current to flow back to the source in the event of a short circuit. Grounding helps to protect people from electric shock and also helps to prevent damage to electrical equipment. The NEC specifies the requirements for grounding electrical systems, and it is important to follow these requirements carefully. Furthermore, surge protection is an important consideration for electrical systems, especially in areas that are prone to lightning strikes or power surges. Surge protection devices, or SPDs, are designed to protect electrical equipment from damage caused by voltage spikes. SPD can be installed at the electrical panel or at individual outlets, and they work by diverting the excess voltage to ground. The choice of SPD will depend on the specific needs of the system and the level of protection desired. In addition to the technical aspects of electrical wiring, it is also important to consider the customer's needs and preferences. Before starting the project, take the time to discuss the customer's goals and expectations and make sure that you understand their budget and timeline. Be willing to answer their questions and address their concerns, and keep them informed of the progress of the project. By providing excellent customer service, you can build a strong relationship with your customers and increase your chances of getting repeat business. Furthermore, safety is always the top priority when working with electricity. Before starting any electrical work, make sure that you are properly trained and qualified, and that you have the necessary tools and equipment. Always turn off the power to the circuit before working on it, and use a voltage tester to verify that the circuit is energized. Wear appropriate personal protective equipment such as gloves and safety glasses, and follow all safety procedures. By taking these precautions, you can minimize the risk of electric shock and other hazards. When working on a commercial electrical project, it is important to be aware of the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA. The ADA requires that buildings be accessible to people with disabilities, and this includes electrical systems. For example, the ADA specifies the height at which switches and outlets must be installed, and it also requires that certain types of electrical equipment be accessible to people with wheelchairs. It is important to be familiar with the ADA requirements and to ensure that the electrical system complies with these requirements. Moreover, energy efficiency is becoming increasingly important in electrical systems. Many states and local jurisdictions have adopted energy codes that require new buildings and renovations to meet certain energy efficiency standards. These standards may include requirements for lighting, HVAC systems, and other electrical equipment. It is important to be familiar with the energy codes in your area and to design the electrical system to comply with these codes. There are many ways to improve the energy efficiency of an electrical system. For example, using LED lighting can significantly reduce energy consumption compared to incandescent lighting. Installing occupancy sensors can turn off lights when a room is not in use. Using energy-efficient appliances and equipment can also save energy. Another important aspect of electrical work is documentation. It is important to keep accurate records of all electrical work that is performed, including the location of circuits, outlets, switches, and fixtures. This documentation can be helpful for future maintenance and repairs, and it can also be required by building codes. The documentation should include a detailed electrical plan, as well as a list of all materials and equipment that were used. In addition to the technical and practical aspects of electrical work, it is also important to have good business skills. This includes the ability to estimate cost accurately, to manage projects effectively, and to communicate with customers professionally. It also includes the ability to market your services and to build a strong reputation in the community. By developing strong business skills, you can increase your chances of success as an electrical contractor. When preparing an electrical bid, it is important to consider the overhead costs of running your business. These costs include rent, utilities, insurance, advertising, and other expenses. You need to factor these costs into your bid to ensure that you are making a profit in the project. A common way to calculate overhead costs is to use a percentage markup. This markup is added to the direct costs of the project, such as materials and labor, to cover the overhead costs. The percentage markup will vary depending on the specific overhead costs of your business. Furthermore, profit margin is another important consideration when preparing an electrical bid. The profit margin is the percentage of revenue that remains after all costs have been paid. The profit margin should be high enough to compensate you for your time and effort, as well as to provide a return on your investment. A typical profit margin for electrical contractors is between 10% and 20%. When preparing an electrical bid, it is important to be realistic about the challenges that may arise during the project. Unexpected problems can occur, such as hidden wiring, structural issues, or changes in the customer's requirements. It is important to have a contingency plan in place to deal with these challenges and to include a contingency allowance in your bid. The contingency allowance is an amount of money that is set aside to cover unexpected costs. Another important aspect of electrical work is continuing education. The electrical industry is constantly evolving, with new technologies, codes, and regulations being introduced on a regular basis. It is important to stay up to date on these changes by taking continuing education courses and attending industry events. By continuing your education, you can improve your skills and knowledge, and you can also maintain your license and certifications. When working on an electrical project, it is important to be aware of the environmental impact of your work. Electrical work can generate waste materials such as wire scraps, conduit cuttings, and packaging materials. It is important to dispose of these materials properly and to recycle as much as possible. You can also reduce the environmental impact of your work by using energy-efficient products and by minimizing waste. In addition to the technical and business aspects of electrical work, it is also important to have a strong ethical code. This includes being honest and fair with your customers, your employees, and your suppliers. It also includes following all laws and regulations and avoiding any conflicts of interest. By adhering to a strong ethical code, you can build trust with your customers and your community, and you can create a positive reputation for your business. When working on an electrical project, it is important to communicate effectively with all parties involved. This includes the customer, the general contractor, the building inspector, and any other subcontractors. Effective communication can help to prevent misunderstandings, resolve conflicts, and ensure that the project is completed successfully. It is important to listen carefully to the concerns of others and to respond to their questions promptly and professionally. In the context of building construction using block, it's worth noting that running EMT conduit on the surface of the block walls is a common practice, especially in commercial settings. Proper anchoring methods are crucial to ensure the conduit is securely fastened to the block. This often involves using specialized concrete anchors or fasteners designed for use with block walls. Additionally, when dropping the EMT conduit from the ceiling down the wall, it's important to protect it from physical damage. This might involve using conduit risers or guards, especially in areas where there's a risk of impact from equipment or machinery. Regarding the tubes for ceiling grid, it's essential to ensure that any electrical fixtures or equipment supported by the grid are properly secured and meet relevant safety standards. This might involve using appropriate mounting hardware and ensuring that the grid is capable of supporting the weight of the fixtures. When running wiring above the drop ceiling, it's crucial to comply with all applicable electrical codes and regulations. This typically involves using plenum-rated cables and ensuring that the wiring is properly supported and protected from damage. Plenum-rated cables are specifically designed for use in plenum spaces, which are areas used for air circulation in buildings. These cables are made with materials that are fire-resistant and produce minimal smoke in the event of a fire. When estimating the cost of an electrical project, it's essential to consider all of the factors that can impact the price. This includes the cost of materials, labor, permits, and any other expenses that may be incurred. It's also important to factor in the time it will take to complete the project, as well as any potential delays or challenges that may arise. By carefully considering all of these factors, you can develop an accurate and competitive bid that will help you win the project.